Hello and welcome back. It is now Monday, September 23rd. Things are looking pretty nice out here this morning actually. There was dew, but not super heavy last night. Skies are mostly clear. Looks like the forecast is going to be warm, 24-ish degrees, so should have some good harvesting weather the next couple days. The ground is still quite wet from last week's rain. There is still puddles sitting around here and there, but it's nothing that I think guys can't deal with, so I'm sure we're going to see a lot of acres disappear this week, which will be nice to see. This dryland field of Invigor canola needs to get harvested here pretty soon. This has been ripe for a week or two, but with harvest conditions, it just hasn't come off quite yet. But we're starting to get a little bit of an issue underneath. Invigor canola tends to stay with a fairly green stem, especially when it ripens prematurely due to drought stress. And now you can see it is starting to regrow. So we're seeing lots of signs of regrowth underneath that canopy. So we need to get this off pretty quick before all this green material starts to really get going and becomes an issue in the combine. It looks like we got a little bit of frost on some of the corn, and it is about that time of the year. This is Pride 1027, really nice and tall. She's about 12 feet tall. Down here on 15-inch row spacing, the canopy is tight enough that it didn't freeze down here. So where the ears are, it's still nice and green and healthy and moist. But about a foot or two above that, you can see we do have some frosted leaves. So ears are developing pretty good here. We are building up some solids in here. We're starting to get a little bit of a hard cap. Our milk line is definitely starting to move. So we're getting closer and closer to that harvest timing. So this will probably come off in the next, 1 to 2 weeks here. This winter wheat stubble is coming along pretty well. We do have a lot of volunteer cereals coming up in here now, and this is all volunteer winter wheat. So it's pretty important that we do get volunteer winter wheat controlled in the fall as best as we can before freeze up, because we don't want to be fighting this stuff in the spring. If you allow, large volunteer winter wheat to overwinter into the spring, it can be a bit of a hassle waiting for it to green up and be growing actively. And sometimes it takes 2 applications at burn off to get it adequately under control, depending on what you're going into. You definitely don't want to be going into another cereal or barley or durum or something like that and still have some volunteer winter wheat coming along. So we'll have to spray this out relatively soon. With all the moisture we've had in the last week or two, we got excellent germination going on across the field now. Well, there's still lots of acres of wheat and durum and even barley out in the fields that have not been combined yet. This farm has not done any harvesting really in the last week because of moisture conditions. It's just been too tough. So when it comes to durum and wheat, of course, every time it gets rained on, once it's mature, it can degrade quality. So probably what we're going to see is a decrease in the HVK. We're going to see cloudier kernels. You can see these ones here were quite cloudy. They've kind of lost their really nice, beautiful amber clear color. So that might be a grading factor in this durum. But hopefully the next, maybe even today, hopefully we can get back into the field and get some of this stuff done. This pea field we did treat with Authority Supreme prior to seeding, and as a result it was actually a very, very clean field. There was almost nothing in here for kochia at all, but as you can see now we have a Canada thistle problem. So this field did have some patches of Canada thistle. They were relatively well suppressed underneath the peas this year, but now we got some pretty good fall regrowth going in on these guys. So good time to take care of these here this fall. Once we get decent amount of regrowth, come in here with a product that contains dicamba or Lawntrel, like DB878 or something along those lines. We should be able to get some pretty good fall control on these Canada thistle patches. Then they won't be a problem for next year. Cover crop fields are looking pretty good this week. Since we controlled the flea beetles, you can see the brassica has really recovered. New growth is looking much better. There is still the odd little bit of flea beetle damage here and there, but it's definitely at this stage the brassica can really start to outgrow a lot of those flea beetles, so it's not really worth respraying or getting them under control again here now. And the oats themselves were, hitting flag leaf stage, so we're starting to pick up a little bit of height. Probably another week or so, we're going to start to see heads emerging here. We'll have some nice cow chow for the fall. Looks like the fall rye has been sprayed at some point in the last few days. You can start to see a little bit of off color to it now. The whole field is starting to turn lime green, so we should see some good control on this in the next week as it develops more. Should have some pretty good weather for herbicides to work this week. We're moderately warm, and we shouldn't be getting down to freezing at night. Sorghum is looking pretty good this week. There definitely has been a touch of frost down here. You can see some of these plants are more affected than others. I'm in a relatively high part of the field, and it's pretty minor here. Down in some of the lower spots of the field where it seems like that temperature kind of cooled down a little bit more, there's definitely a little bit more frost damage there. But for now, this stuff is about 7 feet tall, so it should provide some pretty decent cow chow here this fall. We just got to let it dry down. There can be, nitrate and prussic acid issues in this crop after it gets frosted, so you need to give it some time to fully dry down before grazing it once it's been killed by frost. Still lots of standing dryland canola. This field is going to be like many others. It's going to be very variable. You can see this spot here, relatively level, lower area of the field. Yield in here should be decent given the moisture conditions, but you can see out on this high spot out here, some of these hilltops, we're going to have very poor yield. It's very thin crop. There's going to be a lot of pepper in a lot of those pods because it just didn't fill out very well. But we'll know more once it comes off, which will probably be this week, hopefully. Here in this lentil stubble, the crop was taken off, I want to say about 2.5 weeks ago, and you can really see how persistent these wild oats are here. You can see these were cut off at harvest. They have since regrown and are starting to put out new seed heads, so these seeds haven't even started to fill yet, but really that's probably going to occur within the next week, and within probably 2 weeks we will have mature viable seed here. So there is a possibility we might get a severe enough frost here to actually stop that process and kill them, but I think in the next 2 weeks the chances of that is relatively slim. It takes a pretty good frost to kill a wild oat, so we'll probably end up coming in here with some Black Hawk and take care of these guys. Here we got some harrowing going on in some canola stubble. I always recommend this gets done in the fall. It really helps with getting seed to soil contact on the canola. Then you can get better germination in your volunteer, get it all up in the fall. And then hopefully it'll all get killed by the frost. Now this field also does have a bit of an alfalfa problem. This was an alfalfa field last year that was terminated, but there always ends up being some that comes back. So we're gonna end up coming in here this fall, probably use pretty good glyphosate rate, and a product like DB878, the dicamba, will really help with getting all this alfalfa under control, and we shouldn't have any in the field next year when we do a cereal. Checking out some corn by Picture Butte today. Now out here it seems like there was not nearly so much frost the other night, so this corn is actually still in great shape, still nice and green and developing. Got some beautiful looking ears developing in here. Now there has been reports in some areas of some corn borer, so I was out taking a look at this field to see if I could see any sign of it, and I have not found any sign. But usually the easiest way to scout for it is when you're walking around, look in the leaf axils here, and look to see if there's any frass or any sawdust, and then look above that to see if there's any feeding holes. So quite often you will see shot holes in the nodes or along the base of the ears, and that is generally where the yield damage occurs. If they feed at the ear level or lower, they will chew through this stem here, weaken that cob. The cob will then fall off and not get harvested, or the plant itself will get basically fail and lodge and miss the harvester. So that's really where the yield loss comes from. You will occasionally see them in the tips as well. You'll see them feeding on those kernels on the end of the ear, but I haven't seen anything in this field yet. This field has been seeded into fall rye, and you can see we're having a really nice flush of volunteer barley. Now there's not much we can do about that volunteer barley. It did come up after seeding and has emerged at the same time as the rye. So this is the first seeded area of the field. The rye is starting to come out of the ground. It's a little hard to see here because of its color against the ground, but you can see these nice little purple guys down here. So rye is often a reddish to purple color as it emerges, and as that leaf comes out and it begins to photosynthesize, it will turn green. So it does not mean that you're having a phosphate problem or your soils are too cold or anything like that. That's just how rye looks when it comes up. With the wet conditions we've had the last couple of weeks, there's lots of swaths of barley and wheat that have ended up sitting in the field for a substantial amount of time now. So you can see we got some green patches starting to come through this swath here. When you start digging down to the bottom of the swath, you can find any heads that did get trapped down at the bottom are sprouted. So that's not great. It's going to make it a little harder to run through machinery, get that harvested. It will definitely reduce the yield a little bit as well. But most of the heads that are end up on the top of the swath, they're all nice and dry. Quality might be degraded a bit, but I don't see any sprouting or evidence of sprouting on the top of the swath anyways. So that'll be it for this week. It looks like the weather forecast for the weekend should be pretty nice. I imagine there's going to be a lot more harvesting getting done, bringing us a little bit closer to the end. I think probably in the next week, if we don't get any more rain, a lot of these acres are going to be totally finished up except for potatoes and corn. So we'll see you next week.